Welcome to the Soulful Mystics podcast. I'm Steph.
And I'm Julie, and we are intuitive hypnotists, sharing our journey along the way.
Welcome to the final episode of Season 2. We're closing out this season with so much love and gratitude for each of you. This year has been a whirlwind for both Julie and me, and we're deeply grateful for every listener, all that reached out, and for our ever-growing soul family. A special thank you to everyone who left us a 5-star review this year. Each one truly means the world to us. I also want to give a huge shout out to my bestie, soul sister, and co-host Julie for keeping me grounded and sane through it all. I honestly could not have done it without you. We are both beyond excited for what's to come in Season 3, so make sure to join our email list so you don't miss anything. Today, we are thrilled to introduce our guest, Nick. After a powerful conversation with him, we knew his unique awakening journey and profound views on life, growth, and spirituality would make for an amazing podcast episode. Toward the end of our conversation, Nick shares a beautiful visual of bubbles of reality. This emerged in his awareness during a past life regression session. It's such a powerful way to think about alternate realities and lifetimes, and we wanted to highlight this and share that Nick has agreed to share his session and more of this conversation with you in the new season. So we are already hoping to have him back on the podcast to dive even deeper and share any new insights that emerge. And if you'd like to share your own awakening story, we would love to hear from you. Thank you again for an incredible season. Now let's dive into Nick's awakening journey.
Hello.
Hello, Julie. Finally nice to meet you.
Yeah, it's nice to meet you too. Thanks for hopping on with us.
Absolutely.
We are excited to talk to you.
Yes, well, I know when we first connected, me and Steph, we were supposed to have this like 30-minute conversation turned into like about an hour. And you asked me to join on the podcast, and then I said, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's not every day that I can talk to somebody for over an hour. And I think that consult was like, are we best friends now? 'Cause I want to hear everything about your life.
Yeah.
You started with the awakening story.
Yes.
I was pulled in and I knew that Julie would be just super interested in hearing about it. So,
Oh yeah,
I
I'm
mean,
excited.
if you want to start with that, you can.
If we want to start off a bit of like life story before everything changed, essentially with awakening, if I would start with what I am now, so I would say primarily an empath ever since a young age, and that started off like, okay, well, there's something different compared to others. Moving forward, now I would say clairsentient, so feeling the energies within my body and around me, and also something I don't talk about very often, but a bit of a precognition. So having the idea that would come through my imagination, having these ideas and then sort of connecting them back to events that would happen in my life.
Did you get that in like dreams?
No, this is really just me daydreaming.
Hmm.
So everything happened back in 2015 during my college time.
Yeah.
I would say the first situation, my mom told me that when she was like putting me to bed at 4 years old, I said, Mom, do you know like the angels are around us looking at us? So when she told me that, it kind of clicked in. I was like, okay, well, that's strange, interesting. And when I was 6 or 7, I would do church service with the local Catholic church. So helping out with the priest and stuff, choir board stuff. And she noticed that I was always so energized by that. So that sense of spiritual work, it definitely resonated with me. But after that, it was kind of the disconnect of going into high school, going to school, living your life, had my successes, my mistakes, nothing really special or specific until I went to college. And before that, even during high school, I was always living that like double life where, do you have that mask or what people want to see and like you try to fit in. For me, there was a lot of resistance between my true self and with that mask. And it would build up, build up, build up during the end of high school and then heading towards college where I was very, how can I put this, isolated from like friends and family. I was in police foundations, never really made a true connection. So I was very alone, being very isolated and disconnected. And so what happened was I ended up falling down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theories. And because me and my dad, we always shared stories of he had a big interest in like military intelligence, war, and history. So I started going down that path of looking up things and seeing where the influence of intelligence, counterintelligence, getting the sense of like, okay, so there's a lot of disconnect of what is the truth. A lot of things get exaggerated or misinformation or lies and stuff. So going down that rabbit hole. So it started off with secret missions, but then it went on to World War II. And I think the first one was UFOs. And you keep going forward, and you get shown what you need to see, especially with life. And it just went to the fun conspiracy stuff to very dark. It went into the occult and secret societies. I dropped down to being very pessimistic about life. And at that point, I started believing like complete atheist. There was no God, there was no nothing. Just you have your life and then that's it. There's no meaning, there's no point to it. And I got really into full on depression of consciously separating myself from my friends. And at a certain point, I had a job in Toronto doing security. And it was nighttime shifts from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. And all I could do was drink Red Bulls and have time on my phone just researching things. And it got to a point where I was so depressed and such a bleak look at life that I just thought the world was going to end, like rock bottom. There was no hope for anything. And I kind of broke down one night before bed. I was in tears, just having an existential crisis. And I started praying for the first time in like years. Just this knee-jerk reaction of putting my hands together and going like, why God? Which I haven't thought about for years before. And at a certain point in your life, you have that one moment, it changes everything. And I remember one day still watching my videos, looking at the news and stuff. And then I found this video of these two gentlemen talking, and they were, in the sense with the conspiracy theories, there's this plan to help humanity. And I remember I was at the gym working out, listening to this video, and I just started crying, like, oh, thank God, there is hope. And how life works, it shows you what you need to see. And it just opened up this door of videos of people talking about spirituality and the next step for humanity. And the main premise was the ascension into what they believed was the fifth dimension for human consciousness. I deep dived into that, and they were talking about the higher self and spiritual teachings and like the connection with your soul and the higher, like when you say God, there that word is very charged and everybody has its own meaning for it. And they were saying source or prime creator. So it was kind of like a nice reset for spirituality for me. And so a deep dive into that, and I'm still very separated from my family. Like at this point, I am broke. I stopped paying my phone bill, and essentially for like a month and a half, I was in my room locked. Just in my mind, I didn't know it at the time, but I was just laying in bed and just focusing on my body, not realizing I was meditating. I didn't know anything about that or like chakras or anything like that. And then I get this feeling is like the fuzziness around my body. So the best way I could explain it is my clairsentient part of me feeling energies. It's if you're at a concert standing right next to a big speaker where you feel that vibration on your skin. It's sort of like that. But I was feeling movement and presence and then started feeling like hands on me, which kind of freaked me out. Obviously, I'm like, what the hell's going on? And during that month and a half, a lot of things happened. I can't really pinpoint, like set up a timeline of what happened, but the moments that really shocked me, I think the first one, I was sleeping and I remember waking up. I was fully conscious. It wasn't a dream. And I looked to my side right next to my bed and there's this being. Now, at that point, I was feeling energies, but I wasn't too sure what it was. But I saw this being standing next to me. I would say probably about 5 feet. The body itself looked like if you're looking at an image of space, so galaxies and stars within the body, and it was translucent. And then these two very big black eyes, and not feeling the sense of oh shit, there's someone in my room. Just the sense of peace and calm, and the feeling of it's there for me. And I just get this intuition of, can you please flip over to sleep on your stomach? And automatically, I'm just like, okay. And at that point, I start feeling it working on my body, like my spine, and feeling it move around. And so I wake up and I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. And then other times it was feeling two hands resting on my face, but also in my skull and sort of working at the center of it. And later that I learned and doing that research on meditation and then chakras, it's realizing, oh, they're working on the center of my brain, which is where the pineal gland is located. And so representative of the third eye. And then like the next day, I just felt the pressure on my third eye. And it felt like there was this liquid light pouring out of it. And then I started noticing it wasn't just a general sense of energy. It was, I could feel pinpoints in my body and I could feel it like amassing at certain areas in my body. And I could explain it as if you have a computer and you see the energy of the computer, but you don't know what's inside, but you see it amassing. And then with me doing my research, I'm like, oh, okay, so it's moving here and then it's transferring to here. So it's like it's going to the motherboard, it's going to the CPU, the power bank, and the ventilation system. I could feel it going down my spine to specific spots. So you got your root chakra, sacral, solar plexus, the heart, and it's going all over the place. It's going through my whole body. The moments I remember the most was when it was going through like my physical heart, and I thought I was having heart attacks. I was freaking out because having that feeling of energy being pushed through a dirty pipe where it's clearing out all the muck and it's trying to force its way through. And so that's happening all over my body. And I don't know what's happening and I'm freaking out. And at this point, touching on the precognition events, I was always daydreaming and like I wanted to escape my reality. I was just not having a good life. This is like after the first year and like I failed 5 classes. Like, nothing was going right. And so I just always thought this feeling of it'd be cool if military showed up and took me away, just got me out of here. But I think what happened was me and Steph, we had a conversation about soul walk-ins. And so what I think happened was either another soul came in or I had an upgrade that didn't really understand how to live in a physical body because once I came back to it, I had to relearn some things like my lefts and right. Me and my mom we were talking about months, and I somehow completely forgot the order of the months. And I was looking at my hands and looking at like the veins in my hands and going, what is this? Having the internal conversation of like, what is this? What is a body? And so that's why I think that there was something new within me that came out. So as time went on, my mom said, that's enough. Like, I'm going to see my son. And so I remember I was meditating and like focusing on the vibrations of my body. And she shows up and she's like, what's going on? And then I'm like, I grab her hand and I'm like, don't you feel the vibrations? Like, don't you feel this? And she's like, no, no, no. So she's like, okay, we'll go for a walk. And I start talking and I'm still being very indoctrinated, sort of. But I'm watching a lot of YouTube videos and conspiracy theories. And so I'm trying to explain to her, like, oh, it's all a lie. You don't understand. And I yelled that out while we were walking. And I was talking about how, like, the ascension process and, like, we're all going to ascend and, like, leave our physical bodies. And that's what I truly thought because I was just so deep into it and I lost touch with reality. And she kind of used my words against me in a good way. God put you here for a reason. You're here to help people if that's what your purpose is to be on earth. You have to come back to reality. So I was just so far gone. And then she was trying to understand what I was going through. And this was around 2015, 2016. And so we're eating and she starts to ask me like, okay, so are you saying like we don't live right by God? Is there something wrong with our society and like you're angry because of that? And then I didn't realize why she was asking those questions, but at a certain point, and this was back when in the Middle East there was a lot of like extremists and like ISIS was going around. And then I had the realization, the self look at a guy that hasn't talked to anybody, listening to videos online, and I had a big beard, just looking completely nuts. And then I had the realization, oh, okay, so they don't understand what I'm going through. My mom thought I was being radicalized to go fight in the Middle East because that was happening. So I took a look at myself and I'm like, oh, okay, I have to live my life. I can't be a hermit. And so I told her, like, I'm dropping out of school. I can't do this. Like, I have to figure out something else. So I went to get a job. And then I lived with my sister for about a year and a half. And that was such a blessing because she was like someone I could talk to and just throw ideas, knowing there wasn't going to be any judgment. Being able to talk to her about that stuff, she kind of brought me back to a level playing field because she's not spiritual at all. She's very scientific, down to earth. And so I realized, okay, maybe my things doesn't make really much sense, which was a good thing for me. After that, it was just going back into reality, getting a job, making sure I could live my life. I think for like the past 5 years, just trying to figure out what I wanted to do, but just taking in the information and trying to figure out, okay, well, why these abilities and like why am I being visited? And these visitations happen every night. It's not like those ended. I have the awareness that the perception of the energies, and I always see them. It's like a fuzzy image of a person, but it's very transparent. And going to bed, they'll come down and they'll work on my body. A couple times they would speak to me. Once or twice it happened where I would try to go to bed and then all I would hear is, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. But very clearly. It was like very clearly and it was inside my head. It wasn't like on the outside. The other one was just have a good night.
Have you ever come to a point where you tried to communicate with them or ask them questions, or have you done that in meditation?
Yes, I have tried, but it never get like direct communication. It was always more
Mm.
ideas or like visions in my head, where it was more of a thought than actual speech.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, did it make sense to you, those pictures?
Yes, it did, but in a sense, I wasn't understanding what was going on.
Mm,
Like I said before, I wasn't deep into it. I was coming back into a spiritual sense,
yeah.
but it was random images. I couldn't really make it out unless I was very focused on what it was.
Okay.
It's like I didn't take it seriously almost. Right now, more so, I'm trying to focus on like having intention on my meditation. And one thing I wanted to say during these videos with like the ascension process, and they were talking about a great spiritual awakening for the entire planet. And this was back in 2016. And they were talking about a event that would trigger a lot of people. Either it was like a natural disaster or anything like that. On their end, they were saying, oh, it's going to be mass arrests, like all the negative people in the world, like they're going to be put in their place, essentially, and the world would be free. Now, obviously, that didn't happen, but one thing we do know that happened was in 2020 was COVID, which we all know was a very big triggering event for people. A lot of new aspects of what we were and what we are now is very different. Just realizing that we are all interconnected, the whole planet, with like in a very physical sense, we have like the supply chain, which messed up a lot, but also interactions with people where we know some people got carried away, either both sides, either I don't give a shit or I want to protect myself and protect others. And it really separated people, but at the same time, it brought people together, realizing that we have to be a community and work together to get through tough situations where we weren't really focusing on that. It was more go, go, go. And so that really awakened a lot of people. And the process is still going on today, where things have been broken down and rebuilt, and we see the divisions going on everywhere.
Yeah, there's a few things I wanted to touch on. One, I love that you said you didn't feel afraid when you had that visitation, because that is something that a lot of people do fear. That could be, seeing a spirit or someone visiting you, is to really focus on how you feel before letting in those things that you might have learned from society and from growing up. Because I just watched a documentary about a UFO, and there was a lot of fear in it. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge the fact that, they might be supporting us in some way or another. And when you say that they're working on your body, do you feel they're helping you to heal, or is it like an upgrade? What's your intuition telling you about that?
What my intuition was telling me was this was definitely an upgrade. A couple of years back, I went to go see a psychic, and she was talking about a presence in the room, and she's like, she's the one that gave you these gifts. It was definitely given. It's not something I had. It was definitely an upgrade at that point in my life where I had nothing, where it was like, okay, now it's a good reset. Now here's this, and work out what you have with it and start working on a plan to figure out how this involvement in my life can help others. And so, what I've come to realize is I have the ability to, when we talk about like inner energy and people doing like Qigong or Tai Chi, they talk about like moving and accessing that body energy field with the human body. Before all this happened, obviously, I had my baseline five senses. Now I have a sixth sense, never shuts off. It's always on. At some points, I would wish it would shut off because it was just so intense. But now it's kind of finally stabilized where I know how to utilize it. And I started realizing when I'm doing my meditations purposefully now, trying to imagine, trying to maximize, see what affects what. So, especially with the breathing, we all know there are different types of breathing. And I was kind of noticing, okay, so if I start breathing this way, my energy goes like this. And for me, like I play a lot of video games, I'm always curious on how things interact with each other and seeing what's connected. And so I've started to develop breathing techniques. One thing I want to do is create guided meditations because I would say my edge is that I can guide people into activating their energy. So trying to figure out how my abilities can help people with that. And also coming from rock bottom with depression, also with drug addiction, trying to come back from that was a very long process. This was when I was 19, 20, and like I'm 28 now and I'm finally stable. Past couple years of like, okay, I have a life and I have my self-confidence back and I'm living my full potential. So developing a one-on-one program, showing them the tricks and tools that I've had, and also being an empath, being able to see, like I'll have conversations with people and I love having conversations with people, being in the position where if someone's talking and they're going off in a long story, but there's little tangents that I start feeling that emotion pick up and I'll be like, oh, stop, go back to that and then expand on that. And multiple times it's happened where we've gotten closer to the truth of what's bugging them, where's the anxiety or depression, what's triggering them. Doing one-on-ones with people, hopefully with my abilities to help people with that.
Yeah, and what you just said highlights and reminds me of why I really wanted you on the podcast. Because not only are you very well spoken, very intelligent, I had to Google a couple words that you said because I didn't know what they meant. But this is what we need for the men who are wanting to improve their lives. Because what you just described when I work with a woman is they don't have as much of that little peak that you notice. Oh, okay, no, that was a trigger. It was like a minuscule trigger that men are taught to hide. And the fact that you know, because based on experience and based on your empathic abilities, that is so needed right now. I've been working, like a lot of men have been coming to me recently. And if you were doing this, I would love to refer a lot of these men to you because what you bring to the table is not only life experience, like hard life experience, which it really makes for an amazing
Yeah.
support when someone has gone through something and understand how to support somebody coming out of it. But yeah, I just feel like it's something that we really need as well as to explain your clairsentience,
Yeah.
right? Like if you try to explain that to any of my brothers, like they don't care to listen to
Yeah.
me, but if you had somebody who can really reach them, it would be another
Yeah.
man. I don't know why, but it really does make a difference in some people.
Well, yeah, and like one point I want to go on is like obviously men and women are very different, especially emotionally.
Oh,
That
yeah.
a lot has to do with like the program we get in school of like toughen up, men don't cry. And growing up, especially as a young kid, you don't realize, and not to say like obviously everybody has their problems, and especially with today, there is like the divine feminine women empowerment. But at the same time, obviously when a pendulum swings, you don't want it to go so far back where yes, we want to bring those issues to light, but we still can't forget about men's issues. Like you have that slow realization for men. It's like, okay, now what do I do to push my life forward where I can provide for my family, where I can provide for my partner? Now, this is more on the esoteric side. Our reality is light and dark. So you have darkness, but for it to be seen, you have to bring in the light. And the dark will always hide away. So you got your ego self and the self that you put forward into the world. If it clashes with your true self, it's going to cause problems, depression, anxiety. And that's why we see it so much today because that true self is coming out. The true self wants to be seen. There's more energy in the world. People are being more themselves, but they still need to break down that old barrier of the ego. And one analogy is when you light a candle in a dark room, the darkness has to hide away. There's no darkness that stays there, and where it hides is behind you. That's your shadow self. It wants to remain unseen because the moment you bring it into the light, it's being healed. The moment you have perception of a concept within yourself or out in the world, there is a process of, let's say, you start communicating about it, having healthy conversations about suicide, depression, anxiety. And especially in a very connected world with the internet, we're seeing everything happening in the world. You're connected to everything, and people are losing it. But at the same time, they need to see what is going on, especially in a like worldwide human consciousness sense, especially with the wars going on right now. Like you have the two main ones, obviously with Ukraine and Gaza, but you have the two most old concepts of warfare. You have one that is for territory and self-protection, but then you have another one that is for religious beliefs, where people are finally noticing and looking at it and going, why are we still fighting this? Like, how long has this been going on for? And isn't there another way we can solve this? We have a very big problem with people that want to continue that rhetoric and they have their own strategies. And the best way you want to do that is not to join in. You can't solve the problem while being in it because you're not seeing it at its full concept. You have to stand aside and look at it and breaking it down essentially and to rise above it. Now, unfortunately, with today's world, everything's being so polarized where it's being separated into one camp or the other. And for people to understand, just to bring the concept forward is half the battle. So essentially, yes, some battles can be fought with like guns, tanks, and bullets, but other ones are very psychological. And what's going on today is considered fifth generational warfare. It's a psychological warfare. And it's all on the premise of divide and conquer. If people are divided, you can control them so much easier. One, you have to pick a target and just talk about it. So isolate that target. You constant news cycle, talk about this, talk about that, without letting people time to decompress and like think about it and just push that narrative forward and then polarize it. So then make it them versus us. Try to separate them, make them seem less human or make them the problem. And at the same time, you're personalizing that issue. So how is it affecting you? How are you affected by this? What is it going to do to you? And so those examples you could see back in the day, it was Occupy Wall Street. It was the rich versus the poor. That separated us, and you could still see that division today. It went through civil rights movements with black versus white. It was the same strategy. But then it goes even further. You got it men versus women with the movements, left versus right, even adults versus children, parents versus children. All these issues, yes, we need to talk and have a conversation because there are issues that are still blinding us. They're still holding us back. But to jump into a fight for them out of fear is going to be very counterintuitive. You have to go at it as a point of love, to talk about it on a point of we want to come out of this for the better, not pushing someone else down. And so when you're changing, you have these like when you're growing up, you have these growing pains. And yes, you are becoming something new, but it is going to hurt in the process. There's always going to be tough times, but it's always about staying in that positive lane to realize that we are more than what we were programmed to believe. There, with the teachings and stuff, it is bringing back with especially with like old text revelations and like the apocalypse. I do believe like we are in the apocalypse, but the Greek meaning of apocalypse was just the revealing. So everything's coming to light. It's all about healing and bringing forth and reminding people the divinity, the inner divinity of being a human being with like a human soul. And when people say divinity, it's not in the religious sense. The meaning of it is transcend human limitations or perceived limitations, and bringing back to realize that the whole point of life is to come down here and to learn lessons, to live your life, but we do have the ability to create our own life. And that's the whole point of this existence, essentially.
I have to say, when you said we have to come at it with love, that's something that you don't really hear a lot of men talking about.
No, yeah.
Yeah, that's not something you would hear from a man.
Still very like closeted. It's not something you can really just bring up in a conversation.
Yeah.
I think, but to talk in a general sense, it is very rare to see that
Mhm.
being in the open.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know Steph and I are so grateful that you're here talking to us about it because this is what people need to hear. I mean, they get our perspective. We're both women, so we come from a place of love. I mean, we're very nurturing, both of us. But to hear the women hear a man, you're coming at it from a place of love. You're just like Steph said, you're very well spoken. Like I could sit here, I'm like captivated by listening to you and your experience, but it's more than your experience. It's your perspective too. It's your understanding of all the different points in your life from where you started out to where you are now and everything in between. Just listening to you, I already am thinking of all the different men in my life that I know who just sound so similar to what you're saying, not necessarily to the spiritual side of it,
Yeah.
but who have gone through something so similar, the drug addiction, the depression, and now they're trying to figure out their life and where they stand. And some of them are taking on more of a spiritual perspective, but I mean, not quite to your level, but there is absolutely a need for where you're headed with the work that you want to do. I know Steph and I are more than happy to help you get your message and your voice out there as much as we can. And, whenever you're ready to get the ball rolling on this, come back and talk to us and we'll share with our listeners how people can get in touch with you. And yeah, I mean, I know I'm a woman, but like if you want practice, if you want to practice honing in on what you're doing, like
Oh, of course. And it's like I was talking to some of my buddies, and I do want them to participate. Obviously, they're my friends, they're going to have to. But it's giving like they're going to be my guinea pigs essentially. Some of them have that little spark of like there is more, but I would say most of them are very down to earth and don't talk about this stuff. And that's why I want to talk to them about it. Really talking to people, I like to know where they're at on their journey. Trying to break down of like, okay, I could talk about this to them, but they're not going to take this in. That's going to go right over their head. With my conversation, I hope that at the end of it, if they take 10% in, that for me, I've planted a seed where it's going to grow. And it's in a sense, it's like remembering who you are because that's the whole point of being on earth, just growing and remembering that we're not all separated. We're all together. We're all connected.
Yes.
Science is, I would say, catching up, but it's more spiritual people had to wait for science to start delving into that stuff. So, like quantum physics, quantum entanglement, and just realizing that everything's connected. And so, when you start seeing studies, especially with like DNA and how DNA actually communicates, which is by light, they've started seeing that. And it's just small little things here and there where the next step in human evolution is going to be a very obviously, there's AI which there's positives and negatives. But I think it's going to be a very big positive. Again, to look forward with love, not fear. Because if you look with fear, it's just going to cause more problems. But if you look at it with a positive sense, to have an open mind, all the possibilities are there. And so back in the day, in the past 100 years, it's been very materialistic. You want that big house with the white picket fence, the car. You could already see today the younger generation doesn't give a shit about that. They're looking for more. They want to live their life. They want to have experiences. You could notably see there is a shift in humanity coming forward. With all the pain, it's the growing pains. There is a certain amount that we have to heal before we step forward. One example, it's like I was born 100 years too late to explore the world. I was born 100 years too early to explore space. We are at such a point where we have the responsibility to set ourselves up to go out and explore. We're in that mid between point of are we going to bring all the shit baggage that we have and beliefs and programming that isn't necessary for us to move forward? Or are we going to rediscover who we are and bring forth something that is ready to go out there and explore and be the better version of ourselves for the future?
I would clap.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I feel like we can explore all that we want within ourselves. And your session was Julie listened to it, and it's so hard to keep up with because you were going so quickly through these motions. And that was, I mean, just from my point of view, was epic because I can't
Yeah.
even imagine what it was like for you because you were going to so many amazing places and experiences. I did have a question though. The woman that visited you that the psychic talked about,
Yeah.
was that the same woman that you encountered?
I think so. My intuition says yes. I have that feeling. I've tried connecting, but I don't get a clear sense of what it is. I'll have to revisit it, but I don't have a clear sense of who it is in my life or a past life. It's just a nameless guide. My life is always go, 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 whether I like it or not. So it's always hard to find some time, but it is something I'd like to focus more on a personal level. Yeah, no, the one thing I know it was like the bubbles of reality and like the different lives and happening all at the same time. Because like in spiritual teachings, it's time is an illusion. It's not a past life or a life you've had before. It's they're all happening at the same time. And with quantum entanglement and everything with that, it's is it the belief that they're all separated or your actions, my actions in this life are going to affect the ones in other lives? Are they the choices that I make here? Are they going to affect them? Are the choices they obviously there's still free will. You have the choice to do everything you want. But with the teachings, there's like soul contracts and your life path. If let's say like I was on my life path and it was supposed to be an electrician, but I told myself, no, I don't want to do that. Well, it's just going to put me on a different path. It's you're not set. It's not like people is like, oh, I don't like the of like destiny or fate because I want to have control. You have control, but you've come down here for a purpose. And when I say that, I have always struggled. Oh, I want to know my purpose. Like, what's my purpose? And people attribute that to a job. But again, that's just a facet of something you're doing with life. That's not who you are, right? You ask people, who are you? Well, job, relations, but who are you internally? Who are you, the person? You're already living your purpose. You existing right now is your purpose. Now, the question is, how far do you want to take it? Where do you want to go? What do you want to do? How are you going to affect people in your life?
As you were just saying that, I keep hearing in my head, what makes your heart sing? because that was a question that a good friend of mine asked me at the beginning of my journey. And it was a question that absolutely haunted me. I was in such like a dark place. And plus I was dealing with so much pain. It was during the time where I had like this year-long debilitating headache, and I agonized over that question for so long. What makes my heart sing? And what you're talking about, like living your purpose, that should make your heart sing. Just
Yeah.
existing should make your heart sing. Experiencing life should make your heart sing.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys know like Bashar or Daryl Inca.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So he says, follow your excitement.
Yes.
Says that, and it's like, oh, of course, that is your soul speaking to you, saying, that's it right there. You have to follow that and figure out why. Why does that make you tick?
100%. It's what lights you up, what gives you, like, fills you with that energy. And that's how I feel when I meet with a client and I'm doing hypnosis, and I get to be along for the ride of the journey that they're taking. You never know what is coming or what's going to happen, or if it's going to be intense or if it's going to be really beautiful and loving. But like at the end of it, it always is beautiful in some way. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for you to get started on your work, because
Yeah.
that's what I was thinking of as you were speaking. What makes your heart sing? And I can just see, like, when you talk about helping other men and, just helping people get to the root of it, honing in on, when you hear that spark of emotion. And I've even had people tell me that there was one time, this was before I even started the hypnosis training. I was coming back with a couple of friends from a group hypnosis that we did. It was just a short group thing. And I was talking about past life regression and how fascinated I was by it. And I was getting excited and I was talking faster and I had so much emotion in my voice. And my friend stopped me, and I'm getting chills right now. And my friend stopped me and she's like, that right there, this is what you need to be doing. And it was right before I took the training, and it's how I knew. It was like one of the things I knew, that this is what I was supposed to be doing. And even like I still get excited about it now. And I'm excited to see where it takes me and the people that I get to meet and help, even if I'm just meeting them that one time. It's fascinating. I love it. And I work for insurance and my day-to-day life, and that, I mean, it's needed, but it's so boring. But then I have this like secret life where I get to do all this exciting stuff and meet with these amazing people. And it's like, yes, that lights me up. Insurance work pays the bills. This is what I love
Yeah.
doing. I love connecting with people and going on this journey with them. And just, I feel so honored and blessed to just sit back and enjoy the ride while they're doing all the work. But I love it so much. So I'm excited. I hope you keep in touch with us and stay connected with
Yeah.
us so that we can be along for your journey and what you're doing as you step more and more into this, and how it morphs. Because I know when Steph and I first started the podcast, because we were always practicing with each other. You don't just learn a skill and never use it and just start taking clients. Like, we've put in so much work and effort to swap sessions with each other, give each other feedback, to help each other improve. And I'm just really excited to see how it morphs and shifts for you, because I know in both of our work, it's morphed and shifted. And we thought, oh, we're going to do this and we're never going to do that. But oh, now we're starting to lean towards what we thought we were never going to do. And yeah, very exciting. And I can tell you, I never ever thought I would be the co-host of a podcast.
Yeah.
I never ever thought that.
It's funny because a couple years ago or a year ago, I made a vision board. And in my mind, I'm like, yeah, it'd be cool to do a podcast. But then when Steph said, hey, can you come on the podcast? I'm like, there we go. That's it.
I love that too. We had another person tell us that, where one of her goals for the year was to be on the podcast. It was in season 1. She came on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, huh, here we are, just helping people make their dreams come true.
And that's it for today's episode. Until next time, stay curious.
Stay mystical.